So now that we've seen how to use two of the more advanced features of React, custom hooks and context, it's worth at least stopping for a moment and acknowledging that, again, this stuff isn't necessarily easy to understand. Chances are my explanations are not sufficient enough to provide like a deep understanding of how these concepts work, and I just want to name that, as it took me a decent while to get a grasp on them, so don't be discouraged if that's where you're at. The best way to learn them is just to use them a lot and to read up on them. There's some really fantastic articles out there, though that's probably not... I haven't written them. I just know that they exist because I read them to get to where I am in terms of my understanding. Maybe I'll link some of them in the description for this playlist, but I recommend just reading up on context, how it's used, and reading up on custom hooks and how they're used. And if you want to actually take a look at like a bunch of other different things about custom hooks, there's all kinds of great places to find them, and I'll show those off in a second as well. In fact, let me show you one of them here, which is this usehooks.com website, which has a bunch of like pretty advanced hooks that are probably not worth exploring yet, but this is a really good example, this use key press hook. And all it does is it's essentially just checks to see if a user is pressing a specific key on their keyboard. So it's a cool hook that it can be called like this, and all it does is it checks to keep state of what the key pressed was, and it checks to see, hey, anytime there is a key pressed, and attaches a event listener to the window, and anytime there's a key pressed, like, hey, if that key is pressed, set the key press to true, and it'll just look for certain keys. So it'll look for the H key, the S key, the R key, the F key, and then whenever you see those, like if they are pressed, you can run different kinds of logic. So there's cool things you can do with custom hooks like this, and usehooks.com and a bunch of other sites like this have been made to share some of the cool hooks that people have created that make this stuff reusable and really clean and nice, and I actually really enjoy that stuff. But that's just one example of the cool things that hooks can provide. And again, with context, I've seen people do all kinds of amazing things with context that make it super valuable and super useful. For us, in our situation here, we now have hooks, some custom hooks, and some context that we're not really using with fidelity across our application. And so one of the things we're going to do here is we're actually going to take advantage of our auth context and look at all the places we can use it around our application. So remember how our use login form and use registration form custom hooks? Let's go find those. Right here. This use login form and use registration form custom hooks, they need to be passed the user and set user functions, or the handler, from our login and registration components, right? And those were passed from app to login and then to our hook so that it could get all that information and then pass back to the component. And that's kind of silly. Like, instead, let's just use our use auth context hook inside of our custom hooks. Because remember that in the context, this use auth context hook is just another custom hook wrapping the use context hook that React provides us. It's hooks all the way down. So if we want to use it, we can just do the same thing we did before, which is say import use auth context from contexts auth. And I'm doing this in the use login form custom hook first. And so now, instead of accepting the user and set user from our component, we can just extract them directly from the auth context. Just like that. Cool. Which means, oh, did I spell that wrong somewhere? Use auth, oh, spelled it wrong there. Haha. And so now this hook no longer needs to accept any parameters. It just gets everything directly from context. And we can do that exact same thing inside our registration form. And I'm just going to copy paste because I don't want to type this out again because I make typos. There we go. And so now inside of our register component and inside of our login component, we don't even have to pass we don't need any parameters at all. Let's go take a look at those. Go to the login component. This one only accepted set user and user, so it could pass it to this use login form. But since those no longer need them, we can just do that. And bam, we've reduced the amount of data passing by 100%. There's actually no more data passing around. We just call the hook, extract or whatever is exposed from it, we take it, and we render it directly in our components. Look at the register. Do the same thing there. Boom and boom. Ta-da! Now hopefully I have no errors. Cool, doesn't look like it. And our components don't even need any props. Everything's done for us, and everything comes directly from either context or custom hooks, or a combination of context and custom hooks. Now, this is an entire paradigm shift from the way we originally thought about structuring React components. Because with this approach, we think about the data and the data updaters inside our hooks and our context, and then our components are simply there to render JSX. And so it's a split of UI, which is all here, and data. And that separation of concerns is actually, I think, really manageable and really powerful. So in the next video, let's actually go in. Well, actually, let's do a little bit of it here. Let's actually go into our app component here, and where is this? Right here. I see our login component. It no longer needs props, right? So let's actually get rid of both of those. Don't need it there. Don't need it there. And bam, we've even further reduced a number of props that need to be passed to the components in question. And so that's really cool. And so up next, let's go ahead and do the same thing with a number of these components here. Let's get rid of all the references to user and set user across our application and replace them with use auth context.